Please pray with me. Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts always give you pleasure, our rock, our strength, and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
Please be seated. Therefore, you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour. We have entered the season of Advent, a time of waiting and preparation and getting ready for the return of the promised Messiah. Waiting for something exciting is always hard. Last week, I watched the father of my head resident assistant wait for her while she finished an art project in class. Much as I tried to engage him in conversation and distract him, he was focused on just one thing: seeing his daughter and getting back on the road for the 6-hour drive home for the holiday. Waiting did not come easily for him, but the wait was clearly worth it when I saw the look of pleasure on his face as she walked in the door. We are in a holding pattern, waiting here since we know that Jesus was already here once, born as a babe that Christmas, and now we wait for his return. While we wait, we can get very caught up in everyday activities, just like the people in our gospel reading. We need to be focused, like the dad in my dorm waiting for his daughter. So Jesus' message is just as relevant to us today as it was for his disciples 2,000 years ago. We must wait, and we must be ready. Readiness means different things to different people. The world around us seems to think that we get ready for Jesus by decorating with colored lights, buying tons of gifts, rushing from one event to another, and becoming overwhelmed and exhausted even before we get to Christmas Eve. Paul's letter to the Romans paints a different picture of how we are to be ready as followers of Jesus. We need to be awake, not asleep from too much rich food or shopping. And we need to be alert and focused, not distracted by the frantic activity around us. And Paul tells us that to be prepared, we must put on Christ. That sounds to me like he's saying we should get dressed. We put on clothes every day. I like this symbolism because whether we think of it or not, our clothes tell the world something about us. They identify who we are. Often, we can judge someone's social class by what they wear, or we might identify their occupation. We can hide who we are by wearing costumes that pretend we're something we're not. So as Christians, we're told to put on Christ. We should be identifiable as Jesus' followers by how we present ourselves to others. Our words and actions should speak volumes about our identity, about who we are and whose we are. The world should see Christ in and through us. And as we move through Advent, we need to look for Jesus too. Being attentive and observant is essential to being ready. We need to have eyes to see so that we are ready to welcome Jesus when he comes. There is a wonderful Christmas story that speaks to looking for Jesus better than I can. The Russian author Leo Tolstoy translated this story from the French around the end of the 19th century. So sit back and relax and listen to Papa Panov's Special Christmas. It was Christmas Eve, and although it was still afternoon, lights had begun to appear in the shops and houses of the little Russian village, for the short winter day was nearly over. Excited children scurried indoors, and now only muffled sounds of chatter and laughter escaped from the closed shutters. Old Papa Panov, the village shoemaker, stepped outside his shop to take one last look around. The sounds of happiness, the bright lights, and the faint but delicious smells of Christmas cooking reminded him of past Christmases when his wife had still been alive and his own children little. Now they had gone. His usual cheerful face, with the little laughter wrinkles behind the round steel spectacles, looked sad now. But he went back indoors with a firm step, put up the shutters, and set a pot of coffee to heat on the charcoal stove. Then, with a sigh, he settled in his big armchair. Papa Panoff did not often read, but tonight he pulled down the big old family Bible, and slowly tracing the lines with one forefinger, he read again the Christmas story. He read how Mary and Joseph, tired by their journey to Bethlehem, found no room for them in the inn, so that Mary's little baby was born in the cowshed. Oh dear, exclaimed Papa Panoff. If only they had come here. I would have given them my bread, and I could have covered the baby with my patchwork quilt to keep him warm. He read on about the wise men who had come to see the baby Jesus, bringing him splendid gifts. Papa Panoff's face fell. I have no gift that I could give him, he thought sadly. Then his face brightened. He put down the Bible, got up, stretched his long arms to the high shelf in his little room. He took down a small, dusty box and opened it. Inside was a perfect pair of tiny leather shoes. Papa Panoff smiled with satisfaction. Yes, they were as good as he remembered, the best shoes he had ever made. I should give him those, he decided, as he gently put them away and sat down again. He was feeling tired now, and the further he read, the sleepier he became. The print began to dance before his eyes so that he closed them just for a minute. In no time, Papa Panoff was fast asleep. And as he slept, he dreamed. He dreamed that someone was in his room, and he knew at once, as one does in dreams, who the person was. It was Jesus. You have been wishing that you could see me, Papa Panoff, Jesus said kindly. Then look for me tomorrow. It will be Christmas Day, and I will visit you. But look carefully, for I will not tell you who I am. When at last Papa Panoff awoke, the bells were ringing out, and a thin light was filtering through the shutters. Bless my soul, said Papa Panoff, it's Christmas Day. He stood up and stretched himself, for he was rather stiff. Then his face filled with happiness as he remembered his dream. This would be a very special Christmas after all, for Jesus was coming to visit him. How would he look? Would he be a little baby, as at the first Christmas? Would he be a grown man, a carpenter, or the great king that he is, God's son? Papa Panoff must watch carefully the whole day through so that he would recognize him however he came. Papa Panoff put on a special pot of coffee for his Christmas breakfast, took down the shutters, and looked out of the window. The street was deserted. No one was stirring yet, no one except the road sweeper. The man looked as miserable and dirty as ever, and well he might. Who ever wanted to work on Christmas Day? And in the raw, cold, and bitter freezing mist of such a morning. Papa Panoff opened the shop door, letting in a thin stream of cold air. Come in, he shouted across the street cheerily. Come in and have some hot coffee to keep out the cold. The sweeper looked up, scarcely able to believe his ears. He was only too glad to put down his broom and come into the warm room. His old clothes steamed gently in the heat of the stove, and he clasped both red hands round the comforting warm mug as he drank. Papa Panoff watched him with satisfaction, but every now and then his eyes strayed to the window. It would never do to miss his special visitor. Expecting someone? The sweeper asked at last. So Papa Panoff told him about his dream. Well, I hope he comes, the sweeper said. You've given me a bit of Christmas cheer I never expected to have. I'd say you deserve to have your dream come true. And the sweeper actually smiled. When he had gone, Papa Panoff put on cabbage soup for his dinner, then went to the door again, scanning the street. He saw no one, but he was mistaken. Someone was coming. The girl walked so slowly and quietly that it was a while before he noticed her. She looked very tired, and she was carrying something. As she drew nearer, he could see that it was a baby, wrapped in a thin shawl. There was such sadness in her face and in the pinched little face of the baby that Papa Panoff's heart went out to them. "Won't you come in?" he called, stepping outside to meet them. "You both need a warm by the fire and a rest." The young mother let him shepherd her indoors and to the comfort of the armchair. She gave a big sigh of relief. "I'll warm some milk for the baby," Papa Panoff said. "I've had children of my own. I can feed her for you." He took the milk from the stove and carefully fed the baby from a spoon, warming her tiny feet by the stove at the same time. "She needs shoes," the old cobbler said. But the girl replied, "I can't afford shoes. I've got no husband to bring home money. I'm on my way to the next village to get work." A sudden thought flashed through Papa Panoff's mind. He remembered the little shoes he had looked at last night. But he had been keeping those for Jesus. He looked again at the cold little feet and made up his mind. "Try these on her," he said, handling the baby and the shoes to the mother. The beautiful little shoes were a perfect fit. The girl smiled happily, and the baby gurgled with pleasure. "You have been so kind to us," the girl said when she got up with her baby to go. "May all your Christmas wishes come true." But Papa Panoff was beginning to wonder if his very special Christmas wish would come true indeed. Perhaps he had missed his visitor. He looked anxiously up and down the street. There were plenty of people about, but they were all faces he recognized. There were the neighbors going to call on their families. They nodded and smiled and wished him a happy Christmas. There were beggars, and Papa Panoff hurried indoors to fetch them hot soup and a generous hunk of bread, hurrying out again so that he wouldn't miss the important stranger. All too soon, winter dusk fell. When Papa Panoff next went to the door and strained his eyes, he could no longer make out the passers-by. Most were home and indoors by now anyway. He walked slowly back into his room at last, put up the shutters, and sat down wearily in his armchair. So it had been just a dream after all. Jesus had not come. Then all at once he knew that he was no longer alone in his room. This was not a dream, for he was wide awake this time. At first he seemed to see before his eyes the long stream of people who had come to him that day. He saw again the old road sweeper, the young mother and her baby, and the beggars he had fed. As they passed, each whispered, "Didn't you see me, Papa Panoff?" "Who are you?" he called out to each one, bewildered. Then another voice answered him. It was the voice from his dream, the voice of Jesus. "I was hungry, and you fed me. I didn't expect this. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was cold, and you warmed me. I came to you today in every one of those you helped and welcomed." Then all was quiet and still. Only the sound of the big clock ticking could be heard. A great peace and happiness seemed to fill the room, overflowing Papa Panoff's heart until he wanted to burst out singing and laughing and dancing with joy. So he did come after all, was all that he said. As I try hard to resist the hustle and bustle of this season, I want to look for Jesus in the face of those I encounter. Maybe I'll see him in the face of the tired cashier at Walmart, or in the eyes of the frustrated young mother with the whining children at the grocery store. Likely, if I look, I'll see Jesus in the expression of my students as they sit up all night, cramming for their finals and sweating over research papers. And then I will need to respond, to put on Christ, and to show my love for all my neighbors with a comforting word and a happy smile, an offer of help, or a cup of tea and a snack for my students. Where will you find Jesus? And how will those around you see Jesus in you this Advent? How will you put on Christ? Together, let's be alert and attentive so that Jesus finds us ready. Let's be prepared for the coming of our Lord, for he is coming at an unexpected hour. May it be so. Amen.